Lesson 5 is on add and subtract mixed numbers. No actual new vocabulary here. We're just going to rely on things that we already know, which, hey, that sounds good. So first example we're looking at here is we have two hockey sticks. One's a junior length and one is the adult length. We want to find what's the difference between these two? How much longer the adult hockey stick is than the junior hockey stick? Well, we're going to use this expression, 4 and 5/6 minus 3 and 2/3, and those are both what we call mixed numbers. And a mixed number is a whole number with a fraction. So that's the whole number together. It's both of those things. So for example, we have 4 feet of length, and then we also have 5/6 of a foot along with it. So we have that fractional amount of a hole along with the 4 holes. So we're going to use the expression 4 and 5/6 minus 3 and 2/3 because those are the lengths of the sticks to find the difference. So what do we have to do here? All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rename the fractions using a common denominator. In this case, we're going to use a common denominator of 6 because 6 is a multiple of 6 and 3. So 4 and 5/6 actually remains the same. We don't have to do anything because it has that common denominator. So 3 and 2/3 becomes 3 and 4/6. Note that the whole number does not change. So then we're going to subtract the fractions and subtract the whole numbers. So we'll start out with the fractions. We got 5/6 minus 4/6. Well, that gives me 1/6 remaining. And then we'll subtract our whole numbers, 4 minus 3. There's 1. So we end up with 1 and 1/6 of a foot. All right. So number 2 says, explain how to find 3 and 7/10 minus 2 and 2/5. It says then use your conjecture or your statement, your explanation, right, to find the difference. So we're basically going to write the fractions with common denominators. And then subtract the fractions and whole numbers, just like we did above. So nothing weird there. So we'll rename these to have common denominators. Well, 3 and 7/10 remains the same because 10 is a multiple of 5 and 10. So this guy becomes 2 and 4/10. Subtract our fraction, 7/10 minus 4/10 gives us 3/10. And then 3 minus 2 is 1. So we end up with 1 and 3/10. To add or subtract mixed numbers, we first add or subtract the fractions. So make sure you start with the fraction first. If necessary, rename them using their lowest common denominator, or any common denominator will really work. Just make sure you reduce when you're done. Then add or subtract the whole numbers and simplify if it's necessary. Sometimes, when you subtract mixed numbers, the fraction in the first mixed number is less than the fraction in the second mixed number. In this case, you're going to rename one or both fractions in order to subtract, and we'll look at what I'm talking about there in a minute. So let's start with a nice simple addition problem. So we've got two mixed numbers that we're adding together. Now addition is usually a little bit easier because we're just combining everything, combining the wholes, combining the fractions. We can almost treat them like separate problems, really. So if we have 7 and 4/9 plus 10 and 2/9, well, these already have common denominators, so that's nice. We can really break this up kind of into 4/9 plus 2/9 and then 7 plus 10. Really treat them as two different problems. So 4/9 plus 2/9 gives us 6/9, which reduces by 3 down to 2/3, and then 7 plus 10 is 17, so we simply add these two guys together to get 17 and 2/3 as your final answer. So nothing really that crazy or that tricky on that one. Number 2, we're going to subtract, and sometimes subtraction can be a little bit hairy, but in this particular example, it's not so bad. All right, so there's really kind of two ways we can go about doing it. The first way is we can just kind of subtract them as they are. All right, subtract the mixed numbers. So just like I did before, we can split them up into like 5/6 minus 1/3, and then 8 minus 2. So in this case, that works out fairly simple. All right, so we need a common denominator for 5/6 and 1/3. So 5/6 remains the same, but 1/3, we can change this to, 2/6. So that way we have those nice common denominators. And then we can subtract them. 5 minus 2 gives us 3, which is 3/6 or 1/2. And then 8 minus 2 is 6. Put these two guys together. That gives us 6 and 1/2. So that's one way to do it, but that's not the only way we can do this. All right. If it doesn't work out quite that nicely for you, you can turn any of your mixed numbers into improper fractions and divide them that way. Or not divide them, excuse me, subtract them that way. So we always have that option. So we have 8 and 5/6 minus 2 and 1/3. 8 and 5/6 minus 2 and, I wrote that wrong, 2 and 1/3. So if we turn them into improper fractions, this can be helpful for us. So to do that, take your denominator, multiply it by your whole number, whatever that is, we then add that to our numerator. So 6 times 8 is 48. 48 plus 5 gives us 53. So this is 53/6. And then we can subtract that from 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7, 7/3. So now we just have fractions, so we can just subtract them like fractions. So again, let's get those common denominators of 6. So this one remains 53/6. 7/3, again, multiply both of those by 2 to bring them up to 6 and 14. And then we just have 53 minus 14, which gives us 39/6. All right, and to turn that back into a mixed number, how many times does 6 go into 39? It goes in 6 times, leaving us with 3/6 remaining. So that would be 6 and 3/6, which we said was 6 and 1/2. So as you can see, it gets you to the same answer. Last example, we are going to do a real-world problem. We have an urban planner is designing a skateboard park. The length of the skateboard park is 120.5 feet. The length of the parking lot is 40 1/3 feet. What will be the length of the parking lot and of the park and the parking lot combined? So the key word here is combined. That tells us that we want to do addition. So we are going to add 120.5 plus 40 1/3. Okay, so it's an addition problem. All right, addition problems are real simple. Add your fractions and then add your whole numbers. So 1/2 and 1/3 obviously can't be added. We need to find a common denominator. Common multiple for both those guys is 6. 2 times 3 is 6, and 3 times 2 is 6. So just do that to their numerators as well. That gives us 3/6 and 2/6. Combine them together, you get 5/6. 120 plus 140 is 160. Combine that with our fraction. That gives us 160 and 5/6 feet as your final answer. That brings us down to our guided practice. All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. Do those tonight for homework. We'll talk about it tomorrow.